Hey everyone, thanks for tuning in. If you're new here, consider subscribing. It really helps keep these stories coming. And while you're here, let me know in the comments where you're listening from. Now, sit back, relax, and let's get into the story. I was parked where I always parked when I still wore a company vest and punched a time clock. Nose of my old Class C RV pointed toward the yard, windshield framing rusted tracks and the hulking shape of the depot at the edge of the city. Denver was just starting to cool off for fall. The old freight depot sat north of downtown near the tangle of tracks that fed into the Union Pacific and BNSF yards. You could see the skyline in the distance if you stood on the roof and squinted past the warehouses. To most people, it looked like a forgotten concrete box glued to a forest of rails and signals. To me, it still felt like work. I had spent 35 years as a freight conductor. I knew every siding, every crossover, and every switch in this part of town. When the company pushed me into retirement 3 years before the outbreak, I bought the RV cheap, parked in a half-abandoned industrial lot by the depot, and stayed close to what I understood. That morning, the radio woke me. Not my scanner, not the yard frequencies I kept on low in the background like other people kept music. It was the emergency alert tone blaring from the little weather radio above my bunk. A long, harsh buzzing, then a flat voice. This is an emergency message from the National Emergency Alert System. A severe public health incident has been declared. Residents in the Denver metropolitan area are instructed to remain indoors and avoid contact with individuals exhibiting aggressive behavior or unexplained illness. Law enforcement and emergency services are responding. I lay there, staring at the ceiling panel, feeling the RV rock slightly in the wind. A public health incident. Aggressive behavior. It sounded like the kind of careful language that meant things were worse than they wanted to say. I rolled out of bed, my knees complaining, and clicked on the scanner. Yard control, normally busy with train movements and track warrants, was quiet. A dispatcher came through after a moment, voice tighter than usual. North Yard to all crews. Hold positions. Repeat, hold positions. Do not accept new movements without confirmation from dispatcher. We have a citywide order for restricted travel. Confirm acknowledgement. One crew acknowledged, then another. A third came in breathless, talking over someone in the cab. Control, train 189. We've got people on the right-of-way near the I-70 overpass. They're waving their arms, trying to get us to stop. They're on the tracks. The dispatcher responded sharply, do not stop on open main line. Sound horn and proceed at restricted speed. Local law enforcement notified. I pulled on jeans, a flannel shirt, and my old steel-toe boots. While the coffee maker sputtered to life, I stepped outside, the cool air carrying the smell of creosote and dust. The depot loomed 100 yards away, its wide freight doors shut, windows grimy, paint peeling off the brick. I knew its guts as well as I knew my own. 2 cargo bays connected to the main hall, a set of smaller offices, and up a steel staircase, the old signal room that used to handle local switching before everything went digital and centralized. Another emergency alert interrupted the radio, this time on local news. The anchor tried to keep his voice steady as he talked about outbreaks of violence, people attacking others in the street, a possible pathogen with unknown transmission. They kept using the word contained, while listing neighborhood after neighborhood that was anything but. On the scanner, one of the commuter rail channels lit up. RTD control to all operators. Suspend service immediately. Move to nearest station and secure trains. Repeat, suspend all service. I watched the distant main line. A westbound intermodal train that should have rumbled past was stopped, motionless. The city's usual highway noise seemed thinner, full of sirens. People always say hindsight makes things clear. Looking back, there were a dozen signs that this wasn't just another overblown alert. At the time, it felt like one more bad day in a city that had plenty of them. But the word "remain indoors" stuck with me. My RV was a thin shell of aluminum and wood. The depot was 3 stories of brick, steel gates, and narrow access points. By the time I finished my coffee, I had made up my mind. I grabbed my backpack, stuffed it with a flashlight, a multi-tool, a couple of water bottles, my weather radio, and the old .38 revolver I kept wrapped in a towel under the bunk. I slid 4 speed loaders into a side pocket. It wasn't much, but it was what I had. On my way out, I opened the hidden compartment in the floor and pulled out a short, pump-action shotgun I had picked up at a pawn shop years ago, plus a small box of shells. I kept that one broken down and out of sight. Now, I snapped it together and slung it under my arm, hoping I would never need it. The yard access gate at the chain-link fence was locked with a rusted padlock, but the panel in the fence beside it had been cut and wired shut long ago by someone who wanted a shortcut. I slipped through, careful not to snag my clothes, and walked along the ballast between tracks, my boots crunching on gravel. The depot's main loading bay faced a row of sidings stacked with empty boxcars tagged with layers of graffiti. The steel gates over the loading doors were down but not locked. I set my bag down, grabbed the chain, and heaved. It screeched up reluctantly, leaving just enough space for me to duck under. Inside, the depot smelled like dust, old oil, and pigeon droppings. Sunlight cut through high windows, lighting up floating particles. The main hall was a wide concrete floor lined with empty loading platforms. Yellowed safety tape hung from a broken railing. In the far corner, the stairs to the signal room climbed along the wall. I pulled the gate down behind me, then walked over to the side door that led back out to the tracks, checked its heavy lock, and turned the deadbolt. So far, I was alone. The signal room was my next goal. Years ago, when they decommissioned it, I had been called in to help shut everything down. I knew there was a manual transfer switch for the backup generator up there, and I knew the generator itself sat in a concrete shed just behind the depot. They hadn't removed it. It was cheaper to leave it and forget it. I climbed the stairs carefully, feeling my weight in every step. The signal room at the top was a rectangular space walled with old control panels, some stripped of their labels. A big board on one wall showed a schematic of the yard, with lines and little lights where switches and signals used to glow green, yellow, or red. Now it was all dark. In the corner, next to the old desk with a cracked laminate top, was the metal cabinet I was looking for. I opened it. The main breaker for the building was off. The generator transfer switch was still labeled. There was an analog voltmeter and a rotary switch for source selection. I smiled despite myself. The company had never thrown anything away they didn't have to. If the grid went down, this building could still have lights. Comms too. The old radio rack was still bolted to the opposite wall, and I knew the coax ran up to a short mast on the roof. I heard the first distant screams as I started down the stairs again. They were faint through the thick walls, but human voices carry. I froze, listening. A siren wailed somewhere close, then cut off abruptly. Another voice shouted, the words indistinct but full of panic. I went straight to the main loading gate and lifted it a few inches, just enough to see. Outside, the lot between the depot and the access road had turned into confusion. Several cars were stopped at odd angles, doors open. A delivery van was sideways across the exit, one wheel on the curb. Closer, near the chain-link fence, I saw people running. One man in a torn jacket stumbled and fell, then tried to push himself up as another figure fell on him. They thrashed together on the asphalt. Even from a distance, something about the way the second person moved was wrong. Stiff, jerky, like they were being controlled by bad strings. I let the gate drop quietly and stepped back, my heart beating hard. On the scanner, the chatter had become a wall of overlapping voices. Officers shouting locations, requests for backup, calls for EMS units that were probably already overwhelmed. Unit 7-4. We have multiple subjects attacking pedestrians along Brighton Boulevard near the yards. Possible exposure. Advise all units to avoid close contact. Shots fired. The word exposure stuck with me. It didn't sound like gangs or a riot. It sounded like something else. I pulled myself together and started making the depot fully mine. I walked the perimeter on the inside. The main freight doors had heavy steel rolling gates. The side doors had solid bolts. The windows on the ground level all had steel bars. Someone had built this place to keep thieves out before they ever thought about keeping anything in. I dragged an old pallet jack over to the main gate and parked it behind the chain so even if someone tried to lift it from outside, they would fight the weight. Then I went back up to the signal room and rummaged through the drawers until I found an old metal keyring labeled with tags. I sorted through until I found the ones marked Gen Shed and Roof. The generator shed was exactly where I remembered it. 10 yards behind the depot, a low concrete box with a steel door. I waited, listening, before cracking the side door and slipping out. The noise from the street was louder now, shouting, car horns, that same distant siren song. Inside the shed, the air smelled like stale diesel. The generator took up most of the room, green paint flaking off the housing. A metal plate showed a manufacturer's name I recognized. It was an older diesel unit, probably 50 kilowatts, built to run the building's lights, office outlets, and radios during storms. On the wall was the fuel gauge. The needle rested a little over a quarter full. At full load, that might last a day or two. At a light load, with only some lights and radio, maybe longer. There was sediment at the bottom of the fuel sight glass, but the lines looked intact. I checked oil and coolant. They were old, but not empty. If this thing worked at all, it would work well enough. I didn't start it yet. There was still grid power. Some lights inside the depot were glowing dimly in the office hallway. I didn't want to burn fuel until I had to. I stepped back inside and locked everything again. The depot was my shell now. Next, I needed supplies. The RV had food, water, tools, and some medical odds and ends I'd collected over the years. But walking back out there while people were attacking each other near the fence felt like a bad idea. I stood in the shadow of the loading bay, looking out through a narrow crack in the gate, trying to decide if I was being cautious or just afraid. That was when I saw her. A teenager in a dark hoodie and backpack sprinted across the lot, sneakers slipping on the cracked asphalt. Behind her, a man in a dirty t-shirt lurched in a broken zigzag, arms out. His movements were off, his head tilted at a strange angle. She looked back once, misjudged the distance, and slammed into the depot's locked side door, bouncing off it, hands scrambling for a handle that wouldn't turn. "Open up!" she yelled, banging her fist on the metal. Her voice cracked. "Please, someone, let me in." The man chasing her didn't even look tired. He closed the distance unnaturally fast, like something had disconnected the usual limits in his muscles. He hit the door where she had been, face first, then turned in a clumsy half-circle and spotted her again as she slid along the wall towards the main gate without much of a plan. I didn't have time to think it through. I sprinted to the gate, grabbed the chain, and hauled it up. "Here!" I shouted. "Get in!" She dove through the gap, scraping her backpack on the bottom rail. Behind her, the man lunged. I let the gate drop hard. It slammed down on his shoulders and chest with a hollow bang, pinning him halfway under. His face ended up inches from my boots. His eyes were white with red veins. Skin grayed, a smear of something dried around his mouth. Hands clawed at the concrete, fingers scraping. He snapped his teeth in my direction, making a wet, clicking sound that turned my stomach. The girl backed up, breathing hard. What is wrong with him? I didn't answer. I pulled the shotgun off my shoulder and braced the butt against my thigh, pointing it down at the man's face through the bars. I didn't want to fire. The noise would echo through the yard. But if he worked his way free, we would be trapped with him, and I was not strong enough anymore to wrestle someone like that off me. We watched him for 10 seconds. 20. He didn't talk, didn't plead, didn't seem to feel metal pressed into his chest. He just snapped and reached, like an animal that couldn't understand the barrier in front of it. There was nothing human in his focus. I lowered the shotgun a few inches. "Back up," I said to the girl. "Further." She retreated to the base of the stairs. I grabbed the pallet jack, rolled it forward, and wedged its forks under the gate. The man howled, a broken, raw sound, as the pressure shifted. I shoved hard until the pallet jack and gate sandwiched him between steel and concrete. Bones should have cracked. Ribs should have folded. He kept thrashing, body at a contorted angle that no one should tolerate. His breath came in ragged bursts. Hands continued to claw at the air. I swallowed hard and stepped back. His left arm got loose enough to flail through the gap, fingers snatching at nothing. "You're not getting in," I muttered, more to myself than to him. The girl spoke, voice shaking. "Is he sick?" "Yeah," I said. "That's one word for it." We left him like that, pinned under hundreds of pounds of steel and metal, still moving. I knew I would have to deal with him eventually. For the moment, the gate was secure, and the noise outside seemed like enough of a threat without adding the shotgun's blast to the mix. We went up to the signal room where we could talk and see more of the yard from the windows. She dropped her backpack on the floor and pulled her hood back. She was maybe 17, with short dark hair shaved close on one side and a face that hadn't yet learned how to hide fear. She kept her arms wrapped around herself as she looked around at the panels and the big schematic board. "Where are we?" she asked. "What is this place?" "Old freight depot," I said. "Used to be a small control point for the yard before they centralized everything. Now it's mostly just pigeons and dust. And us. I'm Paul. I used to work out there." I nodded toward the maze of tracks. "Maya," she said quietly. "My name is Maya." "What were you doing out here, Maya?" She shrugged, eyes darting to the windows. "Trying to get out of downtown. They said stay inside, but our building was already crazy. People banging on doors, screaming. My neighbor got bit in the hallway. I didn't wait around to see what happened next. Bit. The word landed hard. On the radio, they were still avoiding specifics, but it wasn't hard to connect dots. I was heading for the bus station," she went on. "Then the buses stopped running. A cop told everybody to go home. People started fighting. I kept walking. I thought maybe I'd find a ride near the industrial area. Then that guy came out of nowhere." "You picked a good building to run into," I said. "Lots of concrete between us and whatever's going on out there." She gave a short, humorless laugh. "You sound very calm about this." "That's because I'm old enough to know panic doesn't help much," I said. "Trust me, my heart is doing flips." Down below, the man pinned under the gate continued to twitch. I tried to block out the faint sounds. We took stock of what we had. My backpack contents, her half-empty water bottle, a bag of chips, and a protein bar. It wasn't much. The depot had a break room downstairs with a vending machine last time I checked, maybe some leftover boxes from when the cleaning crew still came. "We're going to need supplies," I said. "Food, water. There's a break room, maybe a utility sink, and I left my RV out there with enough to last a while. Getting to it will be dangerous." Maya glanced toward the stairs. "I'm not going back out there." "Not right now," I said. No sense doing anything until the streets calm down or something changes. For the moment, we sit tight, we lock down what we can, and we listen. I showed her how the scanners worked. One held the railroad frequencies. The other I tuned to local police and fire. We listened for an hour as the city unraveled. Calls of possible exposure turned into multiple subjects down. Then, they're not staying down. Someone tried to describe what was happening in blunt terms before being cut off by a supervisor warning about radio discipline. It didn't matter. We heard enough. Brighton Boulevard, Commerce City, the area near Coors Field. The chaos was spreading fast. At some point, I realized the lights in the depot had flickered. A few minutes later, they cut out completely. The scanners went dead. The building fell silent except for the muffled noise from outside. "Power's gone," I said quietly. Maya hugged herself tighter. "Now what?" "Now," I said, "we make our own." I had her stay in the signal room while I went back to the generator shed. The city's noise felt closer without the hum of the grid. The generator controls were still in the same position. I turned the fuel valve, set the choke, and pressed the start button. The engine coughed, complained, then turned over slowly. For a moment, I thought the old diesel had finally given up. Then it caught, sputtered, and settled into a rough, steady idle. I watched the gauges until the oil pressure came up and the voltage stabilized. Then I went back inside and up to the signal room. The transfer switch cabinet hummed faintly. I flipped the breaker to building load, then turned the selector from line to generator. A moment later, the lights in the signal room blinked on. The radio rack came back to life. The loudest sound was Maya's exhale. "You did that?" she asked. "Old habits," I said. "This place isn't connected to the main yard system anymore, but the wiring inside still works. We've got lights, and if the old antenna is still intact, we've got comms." I tuned the yard frequency again. The dispatcher's voice was more frantic than before. They were trying to get last trains to safe sidings, blocking mainline access into downtown. Someone mentioned a quarantine perimeter along certain overpasses. Then I noticed a different channel crackle to life, one I hadn't heard in a long time. It used to be for maintenance crews. Now a new voice came through, flat and official. "This is Colorado Rail Operations Emergency Channel. All qualified personnel be advised. Federal authorities have designated several rail-served facilities as protected zones. Trains marked with blue emergency placards are authorized to travel to and from these zones with priority. Do not obstruct or delay these movements. Safe zones. Protected facilities." It sounded simple when they said it over the air. I had worked long enough to picture the reality. Some military base or hardened warehouse near a siding, half prepared, trying to become an island while everything else flooded. Maya sat on the old office chair, spinning it slightly side to side. "What does that mean?" "It means some places are going to get more help than others," I said. "And trains might be the only thing that can move through all this." We spent the rest of the afternoon securing the depot. We checked every window, locked every door. The break room had a vending machine, half full of stale snacks, and a long-dead coffee maker. There was a utility sink with cold water, at least as long as the city mains held out. We gathered anything we could use into a central pile. Mops, a first aid kit with expired bandages, a box of work gloves, a couple of neon vests. It would have been funny in another context. Every so often, I went back to the main gate to check on the man pinned under it. He was still moving, though slower, like something inside him refused to shut off even as the body failed. His fingers were worn raw from clawing at concrete. "Is he going to die?" Maya asked once, hovering behind me. "He should have already," I said quietly. Whatever this is, it doesn't follow the rules I grew up with. I didn't say the word that kept knocking on my thoughts. Undead. It sounded like something from movies, not from a rail yard. But when you see a man bent in half under a steel gate still trying to pull himself forward, the old rules start to fall away. Night came. The depot's high windows turned black. In the distance, fires cast an orange glow over the city. We turned out most of the lights, leaving only a few in the signal room and one in the break room to save fuel. The generator's rumble became a kind of heartbeat in the background. I slept in a chair in the signal room, shotgun leaning within reach, while Maya curled under an old jacket on the floor. I woke up every hour, heart hammering, listening for changes. On the second day, we were no longer alone. It started with a loud metallic pounding at the side door. Frantic, repeated, not the clumsy battering of one of the infected. Someone was shouting, voice hoarse. "Open up, please, somebody open up." I grabbed the shotgun and made my way down the stairs in the dim light, signaling Maya to stay behind me. At the side door, I hesitated, listening. "Back away from the door," I called. "Hands where I can see them if I open it." There was a pause. Then the voice again, closer this time, but not right at the door. "I'm back. Hands up. Please. I've got an officer down and nowhere else to go." I risked a quick look through the narrow wired glass panel. Outside stood a man in a gray transit authority uniform, hands raised. A radio mic hung from his shoulder. Beside him, partly propped against the wall, slumped a person in a dark blue jacket with a badge on the chest. Her head was lolling slightly, but her eyes were open. I opened the door just wide enough to wave them in. The transit worker half carried, half dragged the officer inside. I slammed the door shut and turned the locks as soon as they were clear. The officer, a woman in her 30s, had blood on her pant leg, soaked around a bandage improvised from some kind of cloth. Her face was pale and slick with sweat. "She's hurt," the transit worker said, voice cracking. "We were trying to get people out of Union Station. It went bad. She got clipped." "Clipped how?" I asked, my throat tightening. He swallowed. "Not by them. She took a piece of shrapnel when a car exploded near the light rail tracks. It caught her leg. I swear she didn't get bit. I watched the whole thing." The officer forced a faint smile. "Alvarez," she said, voice strained. "Transit police, I'm still me, for now." I looked at the blood, at her eyes, at the transit worker's desperate face. I had a choice. Lock them back out and protect what little safety we had, or let the circle grow and take the risk. I looked at Maya. She was watching me, jaw tight. She didn't say a word. "Help me get her to the break room," I said finally. "We'll clean the wound and see what we can do." We laid Officer Alvarez on one of the break room tables. I peeled back the soaked bandage carefully. A jagged gash ran along her calf where something had torn through muscle. It was deep, but not a bite. I had seen injuries from train accidents, from falls. The pattern here was consistent with shrapnel, like he had said. "It needs stitches," the transit worker said helplessly. "I don't know how to do that." "Neither do I admitted. "But I know how to clean and wrap. Right now, avoiding infection is as important as anything." We used what we had. Bottled water boiled in a dented kettle on an electric hot plate I found in a cabinet. Clean cloth torn from old uniforms. A small bottle of antiseptic from the first aid kit. Alvarez gritted her teeth and held my hand through the worst of it, refusing to scream. "I owe you," she said afterward, lying back with a shudder. "You could have left us out there." "I'm not dead weight yet," I said, "and neither are you. We'll figure out the rest." The transit worker introduced himself as Devon, mid-20s, tired eyes, the deeply uneven tan of someone who spent more time on platforms than in offices. He had a small backpack with a couple of water bottles, a flashlight, and a box of energy bars. Union Station had devolved quickly, he told us. When service shut down, hundreds of people were stranded. Police tried to keep order, but as soon as the first infected made it into the main hall, everything turned into a stampede. Alvarez had been trying to move a crowd toward an exit when a car outside crashed, exploded, and sent metal chunking across the plaza. Devon had dragged her away, and they had navigated side streets until they saw the rails and followed them, looking for any solid structure. "You picked this place on purpose?" I asked. He nodded. "Knew the depot was here. Figured it was either abandoned and open, or still staffed and guarded. Either way, better than the sidewalk." "Welcome to our fortress, then," I said. "Such as it is." The four of us formed a fragile unit. We set up in the signal room as our main vantage point, with the break room as medical and mess. Alvarez rested, with her leg propped on a chair, color slowly returning to her face as the painkillers we found kicked in. "We can't stay here forever," Devon said at one point, staring out at the yard. "They keep saying safe zones on the radio. We need to get to one." "We will get to one," Alvarez said, "but we do it smart, not by running blind through streets filled with those things." "Trains," I said quietly. They both looked at me. "Trains," I repeated. "They're still moving, some of them. We heard it on the emergency channel, safe zones served by rail. And you don't cram infected into boxcars, not on purpose. If we can get onto the right train, we get a ride through all the chaos to some place with more soldiers and supplies than we could gather here." "And how do we find the right train?" Devon asked. "And how do we get on it without getting torn apart?" "That's where this place and my job history come in," I answered. "We're not sitting in any old abandoned building. We're sitting in a node designed to move steel and tonnage in precise patterns. The tracks are like arteries. If something is coming, we'll see it and we can control where it goes, at least in this yard." He frowned. "But the signals and switches are remote now. They don't use this room anymore." "In theory," I said, "but I know where the bypasses are. They had to keep local control as a backup for years. Even if the network shifted, some of the local switch circuits will still respond. The main line might be off limits, but these sidings and crossovers around the depot, we might be able to throw a few, enough to route a train into our lap." Maya looked both hopeful and anxious. "And then what?" "Then we see if anyone is driving it," I said. "If not, we decide whether to take it anyway." The next 2 days blurred into a pattern of watchfulness and planning. We rotated shifts in the signal room, scanning with binoculars I found in a locker. We counted infected wandering near the yard, a handful at first, then more. They shambled between boxcars, bumped into fences, sometimes got stuck in gaps they didn't have the sense to back out of. We saw a few other survivors at a distance too, people moving fast between buildings, cars weaving through cluttered roads near the highway. None came close enough to the depot to speak. We didn't step outside to invite them in. It felt cruel, but every additional person was another possible infection, another stomach to feed, another voice when silence was one of our few advantages. On the radios, the city's noise thinned. Fewer police calls, more static. The emergency channel repeated its messages about safe zones and quarantine perimeters on a loop, with occasional live updates about corridors of movement along certain rail lines. They mentioned a logistics hub east of Denver, near the old ammunition depot at Pueblo, and a couple of bases further out. "Listen," I said one evening, leaning over the scanner as a new piece of information broke through the monotony. "Supply train Sierra 7 departing Cheyenne for Denver corridor, authorized for movement to designated secure facility westbound via restricted routes. Consist includes food, medical supplies, and personnel protective equipment. All non-essential personnel are instructed to clear mainline paths. Cheyenne to Denver. That meant the train would have to pass within a few miles of us, maybe closer, depending on which routing they used around the yards. "Could we catch that one?" Maya asked. "Maybe," I said, "if they route it through the yard instead of bypassing downtown entirely. But freight trains don't stop for pedestrians waving at them." "But you said you can mess with switches," Devon said. "Route it where you want." "I said maybe," I replied. "The mainline protections are heavy, but if there's a confusion at the dispatcher level, if signals are failing, they might divert into familiar territory. And if they have any local control fallback, this building is where it used to live." "I don't like the idea of leaving," Alvarez said quietly from her chair. "But I like the idea of running out of food more. If we can get on that train, or one like it, I vote we try." We prepared. We inventoried everything. The snacks from the vending machine, the water in the building's pipes, the fuel left in the generator tank. We rationed, 2 basic meals a day, no more. We boiled water and refilled every bottle we had. We moved some supplies down into one of the smaller storage rooms with only one entrance, so if the upper level was compromised, we had a fallback. When we weren't doing that, I traced old circuits in the signal room, following tangled diagrams in a dusty binder. The main lines out there were now controlled by computers in remote offices, but the wiring that physically moved the switch motors hadn't changed much. In certain yards, you could still take control locally by flipping the right sequence in the right cabinet. "You're sure you can affect anything from here?" Devon asked, peering over my shoulder as I tested a circuit with a multimeter. "No," I said. "I'm sure I can try. And I'm sure whoever built this system didn't design it for global collapse. There's going to be places where automatic protection fails or defaults to local. We just have to find one." On the 3rd night, we got lucky. It was just after midnight. The sky over Denver glowed from scattered fires and the washed-out light of a city half dark. I was in the signal room with Alvarez. Her leg was still swollen but less angry-looking. She used a broomstick as a cane to move around. The radios had been mostly quiet for an hour when the emergency channel crackled. "Sierra 7 has lost rear-end telemetry. Last confirmed on approach to North Yard District. Dispatcher confirms power fluctuations in core network. Local control override may be necessary. Any qualified personnel at North Yard respond." I stared at the speaker. North Yard. That was us. "This is retired conductor Paul Grady," I said slowly, lifting the mic. "I'm at the old North Depot adjacent to the yard. I'm familiar with the local layout and backup systems. I do not have current company credentials, but I know the grid." There was a pause. Then a different voice came on. Lower, more cautious. "Mr. Grady, this is emergency rail operations in Omaha. Are you stating you have physical access to the North Depot facility and its local control equipment?" "Affirmative," I said. Old habits bringing old wording. "The panels are still here. The yard is unstaffed as far as I can tell. There's power from an on-site generator. I see no active signals on the local display, but I can see the tracks." "Understood," the voice replied. I could almost hear the calculation in his tone. "We have Sierra 7 inbound. It's a priority movement carrying critical supplies. We are losing centralized control over multiple interlockings due to power instability and network failure. If you can route that train onto a safe siding without collision risk, we need that help." He rattled off a series of coordinates and signal designations. I pictured the map in my head, then checked it against the faded schematic on the wall. The sighting they were aiming for was half a mile past the depot, near a small logistics warehouse with a spur. That warehouse had been empty for years. It might now be repurposed as a secure facility, or might be just another empty shell. Either way, the track between us and that sighting ran right past the depot. Your planned route takes Sierra 7 on the main past milepost 14 and into the east ladder of the yard, I said. Those switches default to stop if they lose signal. If your network is down, that train could hit a red and sit in the middle of the chaos. I can move him into the depot access spur instead. Short, but enough to stop and regroup. Negative, the controller said sharply. The depot spur is not on our list of secured facilities. With respect, I replied. Right now, secured facilities are the ones with walls and doors that close. That describes this depot. I have 4 survivors inside, including a wounded transit officer. We're low on supplies. If Sierra 7 stops here, I can protect the crew and we can offload what we can before you send it on. We'll treat it like a flag stop. You keep your train. We get a shot at staying alive. The line went quiet for several seconds. I pictured someone in a distant office looking at a map, weighing one train's schedule against a handful of strangers. Finally, he spoke. We cannot authorize diversion for non-essential pickup. I'm not asking for authorization, I said, voice tired. I'm offering a solution to your control problem. Your network is failing. I can give Sierra 7 a positive stop somewhere we can manage. Or you can let it drift into dead signals and hope nothing is on the track. Your choice. I'll do what I can either way. Alvarez watched me with one eyebrow raised. I wasn't the negotiating type by nature, but years of dealing with dispatchers had taught me when to push. Another voice cut in, this one crisper, with the kind of command that came from wearing stars on a collar. This is Colonel Hartley with Western Logistics Command. Mr. Grady, is it? You have personnel, a secure structure, and visibility on the yard? Yes, sir, I said. You have arms? A couple of small firearms and a solid building, I answered. Enough to protect ourselves, not to start a war. Understood, he said. Rail operations. Authorize the depot diversion. Sierra 7 will make a controlled stop adjacent to North Depot. Mr. Grady, once the train is secure, you will coordinate with the crew to offload a limited allotment of supplies for your group. The remainder continues to designated facility. You will also assist in ensuring the train does not fall into hostile hands. Hostile hands. They were already thinking about looters and worse. Yes, sir, I said simply. Very well, the colonel continued. Make it happen. And Mr. Grady, if this works, you and your people may have a place at that facility at a later time. We need people who can improvise. The channel clicked off. My hands shook slightly as I lowered the mic. Maya, who had been hovering near the stairs, let out a long breath. So, we're really going to stop a train here? That's the plan, I said. Now let's see if the hardware cooperates. I went to the control panels and threw the first set of switches, rerouting local power to a row of old relay cabinets. Lights flickered to life on the schematic board, faint but functional. The mainline section we needed glowed more brightly as current flowed through. I traced the path Sierra 7 would take. From the north, past an approach signal, into the yard throat, then along a special crossover that could feed into the depot spur if the switch motors responded. The indicators on 2 of the critical switches were dark. That's not good, Alvarez said, leaning on her makeshift cane. Not necessarily bad, I replied. If the indicators are out because of network failure but the local circuits still have juice, we might still throw them. The motors respond to direct current. The lights respond to feedback from the control system. Those are different paths. I opened a side cabinet, revealing a bank of manual toggle switches that looked like they hadn't been touched in years. Each had a faded label. I found the ones that matched the dead indicators and flipped them. Outside, in the distance, we heard a heavy metallic clunk, then the low whine of a motor. On the schematic, one of the dark indicators flickered to green. The other stayed dark, but the faint sound of another motor suggested something had moved. One of them worked, I said. The other might have moved, but failed to confirm. It might be in an intermediate position. We'll need visual confirmation. Devon volunteered to go to the nearest vantage point, a set of stairs that led to the roof hatch. From there, he could see the track alignment if he was careful. You step outside, you stay low, and you keep eyes open, I told him. If you see infected on the roof or close to you, you get back inside immediately. I don't care about the switches if it's you versus them. He nodded, face pale, and disappeared up the ladder. Minutes stretched. The radio crackled again. Sierra 7 to any North Yard control. This is lead Unit 713. We've lost our downstream signal indications and we're riding into a black hole here. Speed is reduced, but we are heavy. Any guidance appreciated. This is Grady at North Depot, I replied. We're working local control. Expect to be diverted into Depot Spur. Be prepared to stop on my signal if your automatic brakes don't take care of it first. Copy that, the engineer replied. He sounded tired and calm, the way people do when they've had hours to get used to disaster. Devon came back down 5 minutes later, breathing hard but smiling. The switch by the third signal mast moved, he said. I saw the points. They're lined for the depot spur like you wanted. The other one looks aligned for the yard ladder you don't want. That means we'll need to stop the train after it hits the first set and before it can commit to the wrong path, I said. Doable with the right timing and some old-fashioned signaling. How? Maya asked. I stand outside and wave a lantern, I said. Or in this case, something else bright. Engineers still understand stop when they see it, even if the universe is falling apart. I'll go, Devon said immediately. You will not, Alvarez snapped. You're valuable right where you are, running up and down stairs for this guy. He's the one who knows how to talk to a train. He's the one they're already listening to on the radio. She looked at me. Can you still run if you have to? Not far, I said honestly, but that spur isn't far, and I know how to read a locomotive's body language. I didn't add that part of me wanted to see Sierra 7 with my own eyes. In a world that had shrunk to a dark depot, the idea of a train pounding through the night felt like a piece of my old life returning. We got ready. I dug out a high-intensity work light from a storage room and rigged it with an extension cord to the generator circuit. We tested it in the loading bay. When I pointed it at Maya for a second and flipped the switch, she shielded her eyes. That'll stop a train, she said, or blind one. That's the idea, I replied. I also loaded the shotgun with a full tube of shells and slipped the revolver into my waistband. If anything got close while I was out by the tracks, I wanted options. When the radio indicated Sierra 7 was 10 miles out, I went down to the main loading bay. The man pinned under the gate had finally stopped moving completely. His skin had taken on a waxy look. If he wasn't actually dead, he was close enough to not be a problem for the next hour. I rolled the pallet jack back a foot, enough that I could lift the gate half a yard and slip through if I kept my body flat. The noise he had made when alive had likely drawn every infected in earshot long ago. The ones that remained outside were scattered. I squeezed through the gap with the work light under one arm and the shotgun slung over my back. The ballast under my boots crunched loud in the quiet night. I ducked between two boxcars, using their bulk as cover, and moved toward the spot where the depot spur met the main line. The air smelled like smoke and cold metal. I could hear distant growls and moans from other corners of the yard, but nothing close. The generator's faint hum came from behind me, grounding me in the reality that we still had a base to return to. The main line loomed ahead, twin steel ribbons reflecting sparse light. I found a spot where the spur diverged, a short distance past the switch I had thrown. From there, the track curved toward the depot loading dock. I set the work light on a crate and plugged it into a cord I had run out earlier, holding the other end in my hand. I crouched beside it, shotgun across my knees, and waited. You can feel a heavy freight train long before you see it, especially at night. The rails whisper first, a faint vibration humming through the ground. Then, distant noise grows into a steady rumble. On the radio, the engineer's voice came again. "Depot, Sierra 7, we're on approach, speed 25 and dropping. Still no signal indications." "This is Depot," I answered. "You're lined into my spur. You'll see a work light ahead. Treat it as a stop signal if it's held steady. If it swings side to side, that means an emergency stop. Confirm." "Confirmed," he said. "Stop on steady. Emergency on swing. You sound like you've done this before." "I have," I said. "Let's keep that streak going." The locomotive's headlights cut through the night, twin beams washing over the yard. Sierra 7 was a long intermodal and mixed consist, several boxcars and a couple of tankers behind a pair of wide-nosed diesel locomotives. I could see blue emergency placards on some of the cars, reflective in the glow. As the lead unit approached, I took a breath and flipped the work light on. A stark white cone blasted out, far brighter than any lantern. I held it steady, facing the approaching locomotive. The rails hummed, the engine growled, and I heard the faint screech as the engineer set more brake. The train slowed, 20 miles per hour, 15, 10. "Good," I muttered. "Come on, sweetheart, work with me." At 5 miles per hour, the switch motor ahead whined as the wheel flanges crossed from mainline to spur. The train eased over the diverging route like a cautious animal changing directions. I kept the light held steady in front of the cab, my shoulders aching. When the locomotive's nose was 30 yards away, I dropped the work light to my feet but kept it on. The engineer saw me, a silhouette against the glare, and blew a short acknowledgement on the horn. The train rolled past, heavy and long. The wheels clacked in a steady rhythm as car after car entered the spur. The couplers groaned, slack, pulling tight and relaxing. The lead locomotives came almost even with the depot, their brakes hissing. Finally, with a long complaining shudder, Sierra 7 came to a full stop. The last car might have still been hanging off the main line. It didn't matter. The important part was that the engines and most of the consist sat right in front of our fortress. I kept my eyes on the shadows between cars. No infected stumbled out immediately. Good. The locomotive's side door opened. A figure in a reflective vest climbed down the ladder carefully, one hand on the rail, the other holding a flashlight. He was in his 50s, with a gray beard and a face creased by too many long runs. "Grady?" he called. "That's me," I answered, keeping the shotgun pointed at the ballast. "You must be 713. He chuckled weakly. "That's right. Call me Hank. You just saved us from driving blind into a mess. You got any more tricks like that, I'm all ears." Behind him, another figure stepped down, a younger woman with a serious look and a pistol holstered at her hip. She wore a vest with a patch that read, "Logistics Security." "Who else is in there with you?" she asked, jerking her chin towards the depot. "3 others," I said. "A teenage girl, a transit cop with a leg wound, and a rail worker from downtown. We've been here since the first day. We've got power from a generator and a clear building. We're running low on food. I was told we could offload some supplies before you continue." She scrutinized me for a moment, then nodded. "We can spare some, but we can't sit here long. Every minute we're stopped, we're a bigger target. "Understood," I said. "We'll make it quick." We walked along the side of the train toward the boxcars with blue placards. The graphics indicated medical supplies, food, and general relief. Hank opened the side door on one with practiced motions using a metal hook. Inside, cases were stacked in neat rows. "You load from here," he said. "We'll help. We'll mark on the manifest what you take so the brass at the facility can adjust. You have any way to move this stuff inside fast?" I nodded. "Old pallet jacks and strong backs, and we've all been sitting still for days. We can move." I signaled toward the depot. Moments later, Devin and Maya emerged cautiously from the gate, guns covering the nearer shadows until they were sure nothing was moving. Alvarez hobbled to the opening and watched from there, weapon in hand. We formed a chain, hauling cases of bottled water, canned goods, and a couple of boxes labeled medical into the depot as quickly as we could. The security officer, whose name turned out to be Franklin, kept scanning the yard with her pistol drawn. Twice, infected figures appeared at the edge of the light. Once, a woman in a torn blouse staggered between two tank cars, head lolling. Another time, a man in a construction vest limped along the outer track, jerking to a stop as if unsure where to go. Franklin put them both down with 2 precise shots each, aimed at the head. There was nothing cinematic about it. Just cold necessity. We worked for 15 minutes, then 20. Sweat ran down my back. My lungs burned. For the first time in days, I felt something like momentum. Eventually, Franklin held up a hand. "That's it. We have to move. Facility's expecting us, and I don't want to be stuck here when a herd wanders through." I looked at the stack we had assembled inside the depot. It wasn't enough to last forever, but it was enough for weeks if we rationed carefully. A lifeline. "What about us?" Maya asked quietly. "You're going somewhere safe, right?" Hank glanced at Franklin, then at me. I could see the conflict in his eyes. "We're headed to a facility west of here," he said slowly. "Supposed to be secure. Fenced, armed, stocked. We were told to pick up rail personnel if we found any, but we're already heavy and the facility is cautious about who they let in. We weren't authorized to evacuate civilians from intermediate stops." "Civilians," I repeated. "She's a kid. He's a transit worker who kept one of your officers alive. Alvarez is law enforcement. And I just prevented your train from becoming scrap. That enough of a resume?" Alvarez pushed herself up on her cane, face pale but steady. "I can still shoot. I can still work. I'm not done." Franklin exhaled. "I'd take you all on board if it were up to me, but the facility has strict intake protocols. They're worried about infection getting inside their walls. They'll test anyone we bring, but they don't want us packing people into sealed rail cars without a clear plan." "Then we ride in the open," Devin said. "We stay in the locomotive or a single boxcar and you lock it between others. We're not asking for bunks and hot meals. Just a chance." I could hear the desperation in his voice. I felt my own decision forming before my brain had fully caught up. "We should split," I said quietly. Everyone turned to look at me. "We can't leave this depot empty," I continued. "It's a defensible spot with a clear connection to the rail network. If every survivor runs to one facility and that facility falls, there's nothing left. We need more than one island." Maya's eyes widened. "You're saying you're not going?" "I'm saying someone needs to stay here," I replied. "With the supplies we just got, this place can last months if we're smart. It can take in more people, connect them to trains later. I know these tracks and this building better than anywhere else. I can do more good anchoring this spot than standing in another line at another gate." Silence settled. A far-off scream echoed across the yard, rising and fading. "I'll stay too," Maya said suddenly. I turned to her. "No, you're young. You deserve a chance at something beyond this rail yard. I've had my career. You haven't even started yours." Her jaw set. "You're not telling me what I deserve. You let me in. You kept me alive. I know this place now too. You need another pair of hands if this is going to be some kind of base. I'm not leaving you here alone." Devon looked between us. "I don't like the idea of leaving either of you. But if there's a chance to get inside a perimeter with running water and more than one generator, someone should take it. I know transit operations. I can help them manage whatever system they're building, rail or otherwise." Alvarez shook her head slowly. "I wanted to go where the soldiers are, where the fences are high. But Grady's right. One fortress is a single point of failure, 2 are better. 3 would be better than that. I can't run like I used to, but I can still teach, still train people, still use a radio, and I can still shoot straight enough to protect a door." She looked at Franklin. "Take Devon with you, test him, use him. He's young and has training you can use beyond pulling a trigger. Me, I'll stay here. I've seen what happens when everyone tries to crowd into one safe place. It doesn't stay safe." Franklin rubbed her forehead. "This is not the intake plan I was briefed on." Hank chuckled humorlessly. "When was the last time any plan survived contact with reality?" Franklin sighed. "Fine, I can authorize bringing 1 additional non-crew member, as long as they pass initial screening and agree to quarantine procedures on arrival. Devon, that'll be you if you still want it." Devon swallowed hard. "I do," he said softly, "but I don't like leaving you 3. "You're not leaving us," I said. "You're extending this place's reach. If that facility holds, we'll need someone inside to vouch for this depot, to get us on lists, to send more trains. Someone who knows we're here and what we've built." "That's a big if," he said. "So is everything now," I replied. He nodded and hugged Maya awkwardly, then clasped my hand with a firm grip. "Don't die, old man." "No plans to," I said. "Find us a frequency that works when you get there. We'll be listening." They boarded Sierra 7. Devon climbing into the second locomotive with Hank, Franklin returning to her post. Tests would happen there at the facility. Part of me worried they'd treat him like cargo. Another part knew his odds were still better than staying in the open streets. Before they left, Franklin handed me a small laminated card. It had a frequency written on it and a short code. "This is the facility's non-public emergency channel," she said. "Don't share it lightly. If we're still standing when the dust settles, call on this and give them your name. They'll know who you are, and if it all goes bad on our end, at least you'll know where the silence is coming from." "Fair enough," I said, slipping the card into my shirt pocket. We walked back toward the depot gate as Sierra 7's engines revved up. The train started to move slowly, wheels screeching slightly as they rejoined the main line. The big locomotives growled, pulling the long line of cars forward. Maya stood beside me, watching the steep procession disappear into the night, her face lit by the dim depot lights. "Do you think they'll make it?" she asked. "I think they have a better chance than most," I said. "That's all any of us have." The train's horn sounded one long blast, then faded. The rails hummed, then quieted. We went back inside. I lowered the gate and reset the pallet jack. The man pinned underneath was finally still, his eyes glazed. I covered his exposed face with an old tarp, more for our peace of mind than for any practical reason, and made a note to get him properly out of there when we had the strength. Back in the signal room, Alvarez sank into her chair, her leg throbbing but her eyes alert. "Well," she said, "we're running a depot now." "That's right," I said. "We're not just survivors in a random building. We're a node in what's left of the network. This place can become a safe stop. We've got supplies, walls, power, and the ability to talk to trains. There are worse positions to be in. Maya sat on the edge of the desk, swinging her legs slightly. "What do we do first?" "We organize," I said. "We set schedules, watches, maintenance on the generator, rules about how the doors operate. We make it so if someone else stumbles in here like you did, or like Devin and Alvarez did, we have a plan that doesn't depend on panic or luck." "And the infected?" she asked. "We treat them like bad weather," I said. "We don't pretend they're going away. We learn how they move, how they respond to sound, which paths they take through the yard. We use the tracks and the cars to channel them where we want if we have to. We make this place harder and harder to take." Alvarez nodded. "And we keep an ear on that emergency channel. If Sierra 7 makes it, Devin will find a way to let us know. If more supply trains come through this region, we'll be ready." We settled into our new roles. Days turned into a kind of routine. In the morning, we checked the perimeter, drained any collected water, and monitored the generator. Midday, we rationed meals, cleaned, organized supplies. In the afternoon and evening, we monitored the radios and the tracks. Maya learned faster than I expected. She picked up rail terminology, how to read the schematic, how to throw switches carefully. She started a logbook of every transmission we heard, every train we saw, every time the infected numbers in the yard changed. We turned subjective impressions into objective records. It made chaos feel a little more manageable. Alvarez worked on mobility, practicing with her cane, then without it for short distances. She drilled us on firearm safety, on basic defensive positions, on what to do if someone got hurt further. Her leg limited her speed, but not her mind. We saw other trains in the distance sometimes, not many. A few freight consists rolled by, some with blue placards, some without. Once, an empty passenger train moved through silently, lights off, like a ghost. We didn't try to stop them. We didn't have the right alignments, and the risk outweighed the gain. Sierra 7 had been our opportunity, and we had caught it. Now we were something new. A quiet shelter with a direct link to what was left of organized logistics. One evening, as we sat in the signal room listening to faint radio chatter, the emergency frequency crackled. "North Depot, this is Western Facility. Do you copy?" I grabbed the mic, heart pounding. "Western Facility, this is North Depot. Grady here, go ahead." There was a slight delay, then a voice I recognized. Devin, sounding older than when he left, but alive. "Paul, it's Devin. I'm at the facility. They tested me. I'm clear. It's stable here. Perimeter, armed guards, regular meals. Not paradise, but not hell. Hank and Franklin made it in too." Maya grinned so wide her cheeks hurt. Alvarez allowed herself a rare, genuine smile. "Good to hear your voice," I said. "How's their rail situation?" "They're stretched thin," he replied. "Too many requests, not enough trains, not enough crews. The colonel remembers you. He says North Depot is now an unofficial waypoint. He's willing to send more traffic your way when possible. Maybe refugees, maybe supplies, maybe both. But they need you to keep holding that spot." "That's what we've been doing," I said. "We'll keep doing it." Devin hesitated. "They asked if you wanted to be on a future evacuation list, high priority. They can send a smaller unit to pick you up when things settle." I looked around the signal room. At the map on the wall, the radios on the desk, the view over the yard. At Maya's determined face and Alvarez's steady gaze. "Tell them I appreciate it," I said slowly. "But as long as this depot stays viable, our place is here. If we abandon every stronghold, the only choice left will be to join crowded camps and hope they never fail. We're building something different." Devin chuckled softly. "I figured you'd say that." I'll make sure they keep your frequency on the board. If you need help, call. If we lose contact, I'll assume you're too stubborn to die easily." "That's a safe assumption," I said. The line cut after a few more exchanges. The room felt lighter afterward, even as the situation outside remained grim. We weren't alone anymore. Lines existed between islands. People started arriving, not by train at first, but on foot. Lone survivors who followed the tracks out of the city, looking for anything that wasn't burning. A couple who had hidden in a warehouse until food ran out. A man who had walked along the river until he saw the depot against the sky and took a chance. We let them in carefully, screening for bites, for signs of sickness. Some we turned away when the risk felt too high. Those decisions never got easier. The ones we accepted, we put to work. Some knew carpentry, some basic electrical, some medicine. We added their skills to our arsenal. The depot changed. We reinforced doors with steel plates scavenged from trucks. We turned old office partitions into makeshift rooms. We strung extra barbed wire on the roof edge. We painted simple symbols on the outer walls to mark it as a place of shelter to anyone with enough sense to understand rails. I still had nights where the weight of it all pressed down. When I lay awake on an old cot in the corner of the signal room and thought about my RV, my old life, the trains that used to roll past without any deeper meaning than tonnage and schedule. But most mornings, when I walked the catwalk above the yard and looked down at the rails, I felt something else. Not hope exactly, more like purpose. I was an old freight conductor who once thought retirement meant quiet afternoons and the occasional road trip. When the world fell apart, I took shelter in an abandoned train depot because it was the only thing that made sense. I locked the gates and turned on the lights because I did not know what else to do. Now, weeks into the outbreak, those gates were more than barriers. They were portals. The lights were signals. And the depot itself had become what rail yards had always been at their best, a place where paths converge, where motion is coordinated, where chaos becomes patterns. The dead still walked the streets outside. We still heard distant screams and nearer growls. We were one mistake away from ending up like the man under the gate, but we weren't just hiding. We were running a safe stop on the edge of a collapsing city, learning every day what it meant to survive when tracks were the only roads that still went anywhere. And as long as trains rolled and rails hummed, as long as there was diesel in the tank and someone left to hold a radio mic, this old depot and the people inside it were not done. Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like and subscribe. Your support keeps these creepypastas coming. Until next time, stay alert, stay safe, and never ignore the feeling that something is watching.